Houston, we have a problem. This is episode 30 of the livecast. Crazy. That's like a month's worth of livecast. That's blowing my mind. Okay. Oh, shit. Microphone. Oh, I always do that. Hi, welcome. I forgot to put the microphone in front of my face. This is episode 30 of Houston, we have a problem livecast. Absolutely wild. So, stuff's in the news right now. I guess Biden is giving a press conference on what's happening in Afghanistan. Everyone is pulling their hair out because the Taliban did exactly what the Taliban always does, which is sweep over the country and take over everything. And who knows what that's going to mean in the near future for everyone involved. What else is happening? Most of the Dow kind of took a dip today, didn't it? Dow Jones. Oh, no, actually went up. It went up at the end of the day. It took a bigger dip early in the morning, but it still climbed high, even though a lot of blue chips were in the red today. Anyway, we're still in this weird limbo. This limbo of coronavirus has gone nuts. Debt ceiling has not been approved. We're looking at trillions spent on infrastructure, which is desperately needed, but if the debt ceiling isn't raised, we have no way of paying for that. We've got the meme stocks. We've got reverse repo. We've got corporate debt bubble. We've got a whole bunch of ancient mortgage-backed securities that were pushed off into the ether that are coming due here. So we've got all sorts of things still on the horizon. But the market is not reacting at all as if any of this stuff is happening. So it's really weird that we are just kind of like, keep calm and carry on type thing. So I'm as confused as anybody else. I'll say that much. But we got a super chat already from Travis Wright. In your opinion, as a platinum tier wrinkle brain, just how screwed is the human race regarding climate change? Any hope, or should we just collapse into hedonistic end of the world bangfest? Yeah, the climate report that came out last week basically said, hey, we're screwed. There are some things on the horizon that can do a lot of good. I've talked about it before. Space mining, getting helium-3 for cold fusion reactors here on Earth will generate so much energy we won't need to burn any fossil fuels anymore. That still doesn't remove the fossil fuels from the air. There are really cool programs that can be done. I can't remember the name of it. Carbon capture, Squamish, BC. Direct air capture. That's carbon engineering. These guys. Okay, make sure that my scene thing is working. There we go. Look at that. So Carbon Engineering is a company that has built these gigantic machines. This is actually a computer render of one because the one they have that's working is in Squamish, British Columbia. But they pull, 10,000 tons of CO2 out of the air. I don't want just get them away. And this carbon capture, they take the carbon dioxide out of the air, and they can reconstitute it. They can make it into oil again. They can make it into fuels. They can take it and pump it back into the earth so it's stored. It's pretty awesome, and they'll need about 10,000 of these around the globe to get us back down to levels that aren't dangerous for our climate. Now, how practical is it they'll get 10,000 of these built? Probably not pretty practical in the near future. But the technology is there, and they can improve on this stuff. But in the meantime, we are probably going to see lots of drastic events happen, and it's going to get, basically, you're going to have drier dry periods and wetter wet periods, and torrential downpours, things like that. So it's going to be pretty gnarly. And one of the things that I want people to think about is, I'm going to bring up that, turn you off, turn you on. There we go. Here's the Earth. Google Earth. We got this big giant planet, right? 75% of it is water, and we have just, hundreds of thousands of miles of coastline all over the planet, everywhere. Just so many pieces of coastline all along there. Okay, if we zoom in here to northern Japan, Fukushima here, this area got hit with, in some places it was like 100-foot tsunami, which is just mind-boggling. But some of the bays in here got hit really hard. And the one that hit the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant was about 30 feet at the time when it hit. And that was enough to basically create a 200 square mile no-go zone forever. Now, that's a tsunami that hits, pulls back, maybe another one hits or so. But, in a day or so, it's done. No more waves coming in. It's done. Now, I want you to imagine a tsunami that hits every inch of coastline all over the planet. Every single solitary port, city, river system, river delta, every single solitary square inch of shoreline gets inundated with essentially a tsunami that's 8 to 10 feet and never goes away. That is what a catastrophic event of melting can do. So now you have not just, a nuclear power plant like Fukushima Daiichi, you've got every single solitary nuclear power plant that's on the shoreline of a country, which is like 70% of them. You have almost every oil refinery, every chemical processing facility, every solid waste treatment plant, every single solitary seaport, all wiped out and gone with an 8-foot sea level rise event. And you have 2/3 of the population living within 40 feet of sea level on the entire planet, right? So an event like that can dehome, 5 billion people, right? So how gnarly it can be in a worst case scenario is absolutely mind-boggling. So we need, as a society and human beings, is we need to start preparing for this stuff. It won't matter if you build a giant dike around Florida to keep the water out, if the wall of water can enter from, Savannah and flood down. So the engineering projects, the mitigation efforts, that will only do so much. What we need to do is actually desperately try to cool the Earth's surface. Because the hots are going to get hotter, and we're going to have what they call wet bulb events more and more. That's where the temperature at night does not cool off, and people go days and days and days at temperatures above their body temperature, and that just wipes people out. If you don't have the ability to cool off, it's what kills them. It's why, places like Paris, when they have heat waves, you get tons and tons and tons of old people dying because they have these wet bulb events where the humidity is really high and the temperature never drops below like a natural body temperature, and everyone just overheats. So, yeah, that's kind of where we are. Hate to be a downer, but more fires, more floods. Turkey right now, in the south is on fire and in the north is flooding. So, and this is not a gigantic country, and they're having two extremes from one end to the other right now as a result of their weather, their climate. Okay, Travis, sorry to make a downer right there off the bat. Cancel bubble. I want a science question. How do distance measurements in space work? The sun is 93 million miles from the Earth, and the Andromeda Galaxy is 2.5 million light years from Earth. How do we measure large distances like that? Okay. In astronomy, we call it the distance ladder. Basically, using the known mass of the sun and the known mass of the Earth, we can calculate our distance from the Earth to the sun. And that's pretty much the first big thing we measured. And since then, we've used radar and LiDAR and all sorts of stuff to confirm those distance measurements. The next thing we do is we do what's called parallax. So everyone at home, hold a finger up in front of your face. And when you hold that finger up in front of your face, close one eye and look at the background behind your finger. And now switch eyes. Bonk. You'll see your finger move back and forth, right? Well, you can do trigonometry. You can actually make a triangle, like a straight line to your finger, and then a little triangle to each eye. And you can measure the distance between your eyes, and you can use the sine and cosine tangent to figure out how far away your finger is based on how much the background shifts. And when we're looking at certain stars in space, we use really, really, really far distant galaxies and far distant stars that won't shift that much. And we look at a star in the foreground and see how it bounces back and forth between our vision. And we use trigonometry to figure out exactly how far away that star is. And so what we do is the Earth orbits around the sun. So it's going around the sun, and here, sun, Earth. And from one side of the sun, we take a picture of that star. And we look at the background. And then we go to the other side, we take another picture of that star, look at the background. And we see how the background has shifted. It doesn't shift by much, by like, 1/4000th of a degree or whatever, but we can make a really, really big triangle and kind of calculate how far away that star is. And that's our first real big distance measurement in space. From there, we start to look at things like the brightness of stars. So once we know what type of star a star is, we can calculate how massive it is based on its color and how hot it is and how bright it should be. So if you've got a really dim star close, it'll seem bright, right? But if you have a really big star far away, it will also seem bright. And so knowing what color those stars are and how massive they are can tell us at like a standard distance. Like if you took a star like Polaris, the North Star, and you put it 10 light years away, you know what type of star it is, you know how bright it should be. Therefore, you know how bright it will be at 100 light years away or 1,000 light years away. And that's the second way we start measuring stars, is based on that brightness. And there is error built into all of this. So when we say something is 2.5 million light years away, it might actually be 2.2 or 2.6. There's error. There's lots of error. And then we look at things called Cepheid variables. Cepheid variables are stars that are a little later in life, and they inflate and cool off. And when they cool off, they contract and get really hot again, and they inflate and cool off, and they contract and get really hot again. So their brightness changes and their temperature changes constantly. And so we know how big a star has to be a Cepheid variable, and we can see them in galaxies are pretty far away. So we can do these measurements that are, a million light years or so with Cepheid variables. The next one we do is called the standard candle. And that is when, I don't know if you remember when I talked about how supernovas can form. You've got the core of an old star. And that core of the old star is, compact carbon and whatever else that's all dense in here. And the rest of the star, the envelope, has kind of just blown away into space over time. And it might be orbiting another star. And that, those two stars are orbiting each other. And as the second star starts to get old and inflate, some of the gas will fall onto the core of the old star, and it'll get little flares, little novas. And those little novas will go flump out into space. But eventually enough material will fall onto this core to get to that point where, the straw that broke the camel's back. There's the Chandrasekhar limit, where when it gets to 1.4 solar masses, or 1.4 times the mass of our own sun, it just collapses under its own weight and then explodes into a giant supernova. And it's the same mass for every single solitary white dwarf that collapses like this. And so it makes the same exact brightness everywhere in the universe whenever you see one of these things collapse. And you see one collapse maybe once every 100 years per galaxy. But since there's, 250, 300 billion galaxies in the universe, we can look out and find one eventually pretty easily. And we know exactly how bright it should be. Therefore, we can measure exactly how far away it is. And we can do this to billions of light years away. And so we call it the standard candle because they all shine exactly the same way. Just like every single headlight might shine the same. Every single one of these supernovas are the same brightness. Okay, the next level, which is the final level of distance measurement, is using the Hubble constant. So Edwin Hubble measured that the universe was expanding, and he measured that it's expanding at a rate for every about 3 million light years, or parsec. For every 3 million light years, it's expanding faster at 71 kilometers per second faster. So if you are 6 million light years away, you're going 142 kilometers per second away from us. If you are 9 million light years away, you're doing 21 214 no yeah 213 kilometers per second away from us, and it's getting, and then you can go further and further out until finally an object is so far away that it's accelerating at the speed of light and we can no longer see it anymore. So that's the last method we use to measure really far distances in space, and that takes us out to essentially the fuzz of the Big Bang to do that. So yeah, the cosmic distance ladder is how we use to measure this stuff. All right, excellent question. Did I miss? That was Travis Wright 13's question. All right. No, sorry, that wasn't Travis Wright. That was Cancel Bubbles question. Chris Taylor, last week you were discussing cool problems with time travel. Just the other day I came across another fascinating problem. A time traveler will have no immunity to the viruses of today. How cool. That is true. They could go back in time and probably have the immunities, but they couldn't go forward in time and have the immunities. So you can imagine like a poor time traveler coming from 1930 and time traveling to 2020 and just getting wiped out. And poor guy. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's one of the things about War of the Worlds. The space aliens invade, and then the common cold wipes them out because they don't have any immunity to it. So that's one thing we have to think about. If we're going to be space travelers and we're going to go across the galaxy to other systems and planets, what type of viruses and bacteria would they have, right? We have to think about that. Like, will we step foot and some space alien sneezes on us and then just wipes out all of humanity, or will we also infect them and wipe out another planet colonial style? It's a lot of things you have to think about when you're space traveling. Okay, Britain S super chats. Could hedgies get out of this possibly theorized 1.7 billion shares if someone bought controlling interest of GME, then issued a stock split to cover? No, because if they issue a stock split, then all the shares that are owed also split. So that becomes 3.4 billion shares that the hedge funds now owe. It makes the float 150 million or something like that, but all it does is cause them to have more shares that they owe. I mean, theoretically, you could have somebody get a controlling interest and then force the board to give away stock to all the short hedge funds and cover everything. But that would be really silly because, who's going to let them do that? Who can afford 50 million shares of GME at this point? That's a lot of money to get controlling interest on that whole thing. The Falcon. Professor Wade, thank you for your continued good humor and excellent perspective. Oh, thank you, the Falcon. All right, sorry, my throat's a little scratchy. We had a lot of smoke this weekend. It finally cleared away, but I'm still in the throat zone. Oh goodness, they're just flowing in now. Where am I? What's going on? Okay, that was the Falcons. Dr. Stonk, super chats. Do you know anything about circular RNA? What's the deal? My scientist sister is visiting, and you are my only hope. I am no. So those who don't know what RNA is, there's DNA, which makes the double helix we're used to seeing, where you've got C's, G's, T's, and A's that match up, and they've got this big long code and this, it's a double helix. And it can be all spun up and whatever. RNA is basically half that leg of the ladder. So you might have the C's, G's, T's, RNAs, but they don't have any pairs. And so DNA is when you have the pairs lined up. RNA is when you just got one side of it. Circular RNA, I don't know. I'll have to research that and get back to you. But like the COVID virus is an RNA virus, and it's it's inside of a cell, and then there's a strand of all this code that's just only basically half of a DNA strand. And when they're doing PCR to test for it, basically what they do is they do what's called amplification. So they take that RNA and they throw a whole bunch of C's, G's, T's, and A's in there, and they automatically want to match up with their pairs along the RNA strand. and then they split it apart, throw a bunch more in, split it apart, throw a bunch more in, split it apart, throw a bunch more in, and it starts to amplify how many are there, and then you start to get enough. You can look at it in a microscope or with a testing computer and say, yes, that person has the virus. We have enough. We can actually see it now. And so they do these different cycles, and they might do 20, 30 cycles to do that. They do the same thing when they were mapping the human genome. They were doing the same thing to pump up the amount of DNA they had in their that they could view. Circular RNA, I have not heard that term, so I'm going to have to pass the buck on that one, Dr. Stonk. I'm sorry. I'll have to look it up and figure out exactly what circular RNA is. Circular RNA on the list. Okay. Truth above all, $20 sends me super chat. I appreciate you and your plethora of knowledge. I am long on GME and was curious what you think will escape first now that Rentec added shares. I'd say many other family and offices hedge funds will copy them. Yes, I wouldn't doubt if we have a lot of long positions from family funds at the moment. I mean, those folks, they've got people on their staff who read all the boards, who do all the research, and they know basically all the things that we do. And they've seen that the best performing hedge funds are the ones that went long on the meme stocks, and the worst performing ones are the ones that shorted them. So it's not too hard to figure out which side of your bread is buttered. I wouldn't doubt if institutional investment in small family funds, or small, some of them are billions, is very, very high. I'm sure there's quite a few whales in there that have invested into GME and the other meme stocks. What I'm curious to see is when they decide to kick it off, because a whale probably could trigger this whole thing with a huge order. And if they've been slowly building up their position, and they've got, a couple $1 billion in the back pocket of margin or whatever, and they just put in a giant order at market, and that thing might just go pwam, and then everything else that they already have shoots through the roof. And so if they treat it like some sort of day trader, they might do pretty good job and could possibly theoretically kick this whole thing off. The problem is that I think, most hedge funds make their wealth not by going long on positions, but by shorting them. For 30 years, they've been able to do all this naked shorting and weird shenanigans, and that's how they've been making their money. So I'm not sure there's too many hedge funds left to switch their position from short to long because they're just so deep. They're so deep in it right now. There might not be enough margin available for them to switch their position out. But I do think there's probably a lot of family offices that have done that. Excellent question. Guys, Britain, that was Falcon. Oops. Dr. Stonk. DJ Darrow. What's the bear case on MOAS? How do hedge funds unwind the mean position with controlled squeeze or other? What are signs of this? I don't think they can unwind it controlled. They don't have enough money to do that. They've got their assets under management, which are so much, and they've got the margin, which is 30 times that. They don't have the cash available to buy the shares or close their positions because, most of these folks got in to shorting this when it was $15 or less. And if GameStop is trading 10 times that right now, they've got to figure out how to make up the probably $10 billion or more in order to close that position. And they don't have that cash, and they don't have the margin available to do that either, because if they did, they would have done it already. We would see huge volumes and huge price climbs on this stock. And so then it wouldn't really be $10 billion to close their position. It'd probably be $30 or $40 billion once they start buying to do that. And no one has that cash. So I don't think there is a way for them to slowly unwind this. All they can do is short more, sock away that cash, and then hope they can do it forever. And I think that's their method. I don't think there is a way for them to unwind their positions because they're just so deep in it right now. There might be a few hedge funds that took a small gamble on shorting GME and AMC and others, and they might be able to close those positions, but everyone else, too much, just way too much. Okay, back to the chat lines here, and let's see what's happening. We already got a couple of science questions today, which are always, yeah. Protege Sun, did CERN throw us into an alternate bizarro world reality before Trump won the presidency? What are some of the best things CERN has taught confirmed to us? That is one of the joke postulations, is that CERN, created some sort of alternate universe that we slipped into, and things have just gone to hell since then. But the biggest thing that CERN did was basically proving that there's the Higgs boson. Higgs boson was a theorized particle that was sort of like the mass particle, and they built a big enough particle accelerator that they were able to smash this sucker together at high enough speeds to see one spin out, and that's probably the crowning achievement of CERN. The United States in the 80s, well, in the 70s they started building it, but in the 80s they closed it down. We actually were going to have a particle accelerator that would dwarf CERN in Texas. Oh man, I can't remember exactly where it is. I might have to click on, one sec. Defunct Particle Accelerator, Texas. Here we go. Go away. Oh yeah, I need to click on you. I need to click on you and get rid of you. Whoops. Get rid of you. There we go. So in Texas, they started building this gigantic particle accelerator, just huge, out in the middle of the plains of Texas, and the U.S. government just shut down the construction. It was going to be $9 billion over 10 years. What was the town that it was in? Sorry, scrolling the. Waxahachie, Texas. All right. I think I can pop this into Google Earth and... No, go away, Texas Guide. I'm not going to do anything to you. All right. Sorry, one sec. Go to Google Earth. Control V. Pop into... Oops. I forgot to put Google Earth up on the... Nope. It's trying to take me to CERN. Maybe I just do walk. Oh, sorry. Let me put the. I always forget to do the thing. Waxahachie, Texas. I think you can see it from space if I remember correctly. Here we go. I knew it was somewhere down there. So it's just outside Waxahachie, Texas, and looking for an oval. Looking for a giant oval. I'm not seeing it. Where are you, friend? Basically, they were digging tunnels, and the thing is like several miles large, and they just never put. They dug the tunnels, but they never actually put the. Oh, is that it? No, those are farm fields. Man, okay. This is watching Houston stare at farm fields is not the most fun thing in the world. What was the name of it? Maybe that will help me. Large Hadron Collider, topographical oval, curved east, southern Dallas County. Give me the name. They just call it Waxahachie. Okay, maybe let's call it Waxahachie Particle Accelerator. Waxahachie Accelerator. Is that where it is? NFI? Well, maybe you can't see the oval. Huh, I think that might be the main building. Anyway, now that you got really bored of me looking at Google Earth, there was a giant one that the United States had started construction on, and then in the 80s we canceled. And then CERN and Switzerland got all the glory and we got nothing. So there's a lot of times the United States does this, where we're building something and it's going to be awesome and amazing, and then we just stop halfway through, and that's it. Never gets touched again. There's essentially a museum at JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at Caltech, full of dozens of really cool satellites, and Congress would have budgeted, let's say, $300 million to build a satellite that would do some sort of purpose, but then never budgeted the $5 million it would take to launch it into space. And so these satellites got built and then never, ever got launched. And some of them are, 50 years old. And so now they're just museum pieces because the technology has advanced so much. Like, why even launch it into space now? So they just sit there in these clean rooms collecting, proverbial dust. It's pretty much a bummer. Like, I would love to just, I don't know, launch them all and see what happens. Okay. That was DJ Barrow question. Daniel J. Super Chats. Houston, is it your birthday today? Apparently it's always my birthday. The one day they won't wish me my birthday will probably be on my actual birthday. Is what I believe will happen. Tiki Bar Dude Super Chats. Do you think the implementation of NSC 005 increased liquidity rule will have fast impact? Will a market crash be required for full MOAS? I think we'll have some impact. So those of you who don't know, the NSCC 005 is a rule that raises the required capital, like put up front for shorting a stock, to go from $10,000 to $250,000. So if you want to, the way it's written, I'm not sure if it's just to have a short position in general or if it's for every short position you take as a member of the DTCC, but it's going to force these guys to put up a lot more capital to short these positions than they had in the past. So I don't know how much of an immediate impact it's going to have, or if it's so that the DTCC and their subsidiaries can have enough cash on hand for when the short hedge funds screw everyone over. Like, okay, here's some money to close those positions. It still seems like an arbitrary amount to put up front. You put up $250,000 and you can sell $1 billion in stock short. That seems weird to me. So I don't know how much impact it's going to have. But will a market crash be required for full MOAS? Very likely. Simply because that's what shrinks the assets under management and forces margin calls, is something like that. So either the margin gets so large that they have to force a margin call, or the assets under management get so small they have to force a margin call. One way or the other on either side of that, like seesaw. So it's very likely that we'll take a market dip. I mean, you can look at the action of the stocks today. So a lot of blue chips took a huge dive early in the morning, and a lot of meme stocks took a huge gain early in the morning. And then they kind of, mellowed out as the afternoon went on. Since we are invested in negative beta stocks, that means we do the opposite of whatever the market's doing. So the market goes up, we go down. We go up, market goes down, and so on. So yeah, probably a market crash either will happen as a result of the MOAS or will cause the MOAS, one way or the other. And it might be hard to tell which one's doing it to the other when it happens. Matthew Abner. With pension funds, hedge funds, and banks holding positions in AMC, GME, do you see them killing the price action by just flat out paper handing early? I wouldn't doubt if they paper hand early, but I don't think they have enough shares to really kill it. They've picked up, tens of millions of shares here and there. That does not make up for the fact that there could be 1.7 billion shares of GME out there. So they might affect it early, but there's just still so many shares that need to be covered. I don't think that they can really affect it too much. Okay. Gibby Strange super chats. Would synthetic shares dilute special dividends for companies like Metamaterials or Sears when they sell off their assets? I don't think so, because only people who hold the real shares can get those assets. The responsibility, or can get those dividends. The responsibility of the person who created the synthetic share is that they have to provide those dividends out of their pockets. They're called PILs, payment in lieu. And if you own a stock that's a synthetic stock because it got lent out, or you bought a naked share or whatever, when a dividend is issued, when you get your statement, it'll say dividend issued by blah, 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 and it's a certain amount. Or it might say payment in lieu, PIL, and it'll show cash. That meant the short hedge fund had to reach in their pocket and pay the dollar dividend or whatever. So if the DD on Sears is correct, and for every share of Sears that exists is $17 in assets, that means if bankruptcy court finally issues a dividend for all of these folks who own Sears assets, all of the naked ones out there, all those naked shares out there, all of a sudden the short hedge fund that created that naked share owes $17 for every single solitary one of those shares. And the same thing goes for the special dividends for like Torchlight before they merge. So any cash that comes out of Torchlight has to be paid by those short hedge funds who created the synthetic shares. So it won't dilute any of those dividends. It just means they have to reach into their pockets and come up with the cash. And I think did I miss one on here? Shakuseki super chats. Thoughts on ComputerShare and buying a few shares on there for Infinity Pool. Also thoughts on favorite flying reptile of the Mesozoic. Yes, ComputerShare. Those who don't know, ComputerShare is what's the term they use for it? A share, not a wholesaler, a share. It's like a middleman, a trading service. So it's kind of an antiquated system, but if a stock is in ComputerShare, it has to be a legit stock. It can't be a synthetic in any way, shape, or form. A lot of trusts in the States use it. It's not necessarily a trading platform, but you can trade with it. You can still do market orders and limit orders. And it's, a little bit slower, a little bit older design system, but its benefit is that you cannot have a synthetic share in ComputerShare. So there was a bunch of DD going around this weekend about transferring your shares into it, and then the pros and cons involved. And most of the cons involved are security related. If you forget your password, it's like a 2-week long process. You gotta write them a letter, and they gotta confirm all, double check your IDs and do all this stuff. So it's a much more security sensitive system, but it has the benefit of you must have real shares in your ComputerShare account. So if everyone moves everything to ComputerShare, that could be something that triggers a whole bunch of buying of real shares by short hedge funds or brokerages or whoever else. I probably won't move into ComputerShare simply because I've already traded enough stuff between brokerages that I'm sick of transferring things around. So I probably won't do it myself, because it took, when I transferred stuff from Robinhood to Fidelity, they said it'd be 5 to 7 days. It took 2 months, and the entire time I was like, please MOS, don't happen that entire time. So I don't have much faith on the ability of these people to move things like they said. So yeah. Okay. Angelo Torres, thoughts on Biden's disastrous pullout of Afghanistan? Well, the pullout was arranged in February of 2020, that we would pull out by May 1st of this year. I mean, oh man, Afghanistan is where empires go to die. I mean, no one can conquer that land, and our heart was never in it in the first place. I think no matter what we would do is going to be a disaster because we never weakened the Taliban enough, because we never had enough control. I mean, if you're going to try and occupy a place, you have to be a monster. I mean, it's the only way to do it. You have to go in there and absolutely clamp down and just be a ruthless monster to have any sort of control. And we never were willing to send enough troops and personnel and money and time to do it that way. The successful conquering of nations in the past has always been, we conquered you, you're now part of our nation. And in modern times, you can't do that. You can't invade Afghanistan and say, we're going to make Afghanistan the 51st state of the United States of America, because the international community would lose their minds. The American public would be like, what are you doing? So, from the get-go, our Afghanistan policy has been a disaster. We went in there, we pushed the Taliban back, and then we never accomplished our purpose, which wasn't to push the Taliban back. It was to, get bin Laden, and it took 9 years to get bin Laden. We knew where he was. He was in Tora Bora, and we let him go. And that war continued for, another several years until finally we got him in 2010. So that was the actual objective of going into Afghanistan. And we just never really had a cohesive plan in place to do anything else. We occupied this country, we did surges, we sent troops in, and for a time, some people in that nation got to experience a level of freedom that they didn't get to have before, not since the 1970s, before the Soviets arrived. But now it's completely went right back to the Taliban sweeping through and taking over everything. And it's going to be really repressive. You're going to see executions in stadiums. You're going to see Sharia law taken to the extreme by these fundamentalists. We spent $90 billion on weapons and training for the Afghan military, and they just got run over. It's really hard for a nation to be cohesive when there's so many tribes and factions that don't even speak the same language, that have different ideals and different beliefs and different fundamental principles. To get them together to be one unit. And the reason why the Taliban is so successful is that the Taliban is extremely authoritarian, and they can at least unite under religious principles. So they can find enough people in every community who are religiously fundamental and be like, you're going to join us. And they're like, yes, I am. I'm going to join you. And so it's much easier for them to join than having, this tribe over here and this tribe over here agreeing like, hey, let's become one big family of a nation and form a military together. And what we ended up happening with that $90 billion was it just ended up being graft, ended up going to warlords who made fancy palaces and who, enslaved children, and we just let it happen. There's plenty of instances where U.S. soldiers were told to just let the Afghan warlord do whatever they want to kids or women or whatever because they're on our side, and it's just a whole mess. We've been there for 20 years, and we never once had a cohesive plan. And the Taliban had one objective the entire time, which is take over Afghanistan. We'll just sit and wait and bide our time, and then we'll take over Afghanistan as soon as the vacuum is there. So I don't put the blame on Biden. I don't put the blame on Trump. I don't put the blame on Obama. I put the blame solely on George W. Bush and the way he went about putting our troops in Afghanistan in the first place. Now, there was a whole bunch of outrage after 9/11 of let's get this guy. Let's get bin Laden, and let's turn Afghanistan into a parking lot was the thing people said a lot. But that's a lot harder to do when, you've got to abide by the Geneva Conventions and human rights conventions. If we just nuked Afghanistan to oblivion, set it and forget it, well, we'd be dealing with the aftermath of the entire globe not wanting to do any trading with the United States, of the entire globe, probably putting sanctions on us for war crimes of killing 25 million people or whatever it would be. And so, this modern warfare of trying to kill the enemy and being as sparing as possible with the public is extremely hard to do. We in World War II, we firebombed entire cities and no one cared, right? Because there wasn't 24-hour news service and embedded reporters with their cell phones, and so you just can't firebomb hundreds of thousands of people like you used to back in the day, and then storm in with your tanks to take over the country. It's just a different period, and I don't know how you can fight one of these wars and ever be successful at it without turning into a monster. Only true monsters can win at these things, and the American public does not have the stomach to actually be the monster you need to be to invade a country and just take it over. So I feel so awful for the people of Afghanistan who know the horrors of the Taliban and know it's coming, and they're, these folks are trying to get on any plane they can to get out of the country. It's horrendous, and I'm powerless to do anything about it, and so is the rest of the world. They're just sitting there going, this is awful, but no one's doing anything. I just feel for everybody. It's a terrible, terrible situation. And, one of the places the United States really, really failed was in granting passports or visas or refugee status to people in Afghanistan. If starting in 2001, when we first went in there and carved out a big chunk of the country, if we just said, like, all right, every woman and every child of under 18, you can hop on a plane and come to the United States, and just empty the entire country of women and children. And so it's just a bunch of dudes sitting around. That would probably have been the best method we could ever had for Afghanistan. Just a bunch of angry incels just sitting in Afghanistan with no ladies and no children, being pissed off at each other. That probably would have been the best thing we could have ever done for Afghanistan. And then when they're all, done, then we can, send everyone back home or something. But man, I feel sorry. There's some people who have got family in Afghanistan that are in the chat. I saw them popping in there, and they're just horrified, and I feel so sorry. I wish things could be better. Stonk Mom 67 super chats. Houston, thoughts on brokerages deleting buy button to avoid FOMO to manage this? Do you think hedge funds will do SFTs on 824 to cash up and start over? So I'll start to cover. Well, Robinhood and others got in so much trouble, and they're fighting off lawsuits that are probably going to cost them billions in settlements, if not awards, for shutting off the buy buttons during FOMO on January 28th. I don't think the brokerages will do that this time. I'm hoping that they learn their lesson, and that when these stocks skyrocket, they're going to turn off payment for order flow and just do direct trades and not worry about commission or any of that stuff. So I'm hoping that that's what they managed to do. It'll be smarter of them, because otherwise, if they can't meet their own margin, then they're going down, and the lawsuits will be even bigger the second time around due to lost realized income for so many people. Will the hedge funds do SFTs and 824 to cash up and start over? I think if you are a hedge fund and you get into one of those SFTs, you can't start over. I mean, basically, you give over all of your assets. So everything that the billionaires who invested in your hedge fund gave you goes to some other fund, and then they give cash, and you are forced to buy back and close out positions with that. You aren't going to be able to recover from it, because you won't be able to get any investors anymore to start over. I I think the SFT is a last ditch resort for a dead hedge fund. They might not have choice to do an SFT. I think the SFT just gets done to them. So will happen 8/24. What's the date today? So that'd be next week. 24th is Tuesday next week. I don't know. I don't know if we'll see much happen until Congress gets back from recess and they can start yelling at each other in public again about the debt ceiling. So we may have a couple of weeks of this like zone where things are happening like that. If the theory of futures contracts is correct, then we should start seeing action starting on the 24th or the 30th of this month. Because I think the futures contracts come due on September 9th, and you have 10 days before that to start trying to roll that stuff over and buying lots of shares to cover. So I don't know. I have a hard time ascribing dates to things. The one date I know is that by sometime at the end of September or beginning of October, if we don't raise the debt ceiling, we're screwed. I would say the world is screwed. We're rich. So we can be those people sipping champagne on a balcony, laughing at the masses below us. That's the only date-ish I can assign to anything. Otherwise, everything else is we just have to sit and see what happens. Someone somewhere wants their money, and they're going to get it eventually. Or that was Stonk Mom? Oh. Okay. Maurice Snyder's, do you think metamaterial will go up due to T35? I think it has to. But the T35 date is all messed up. We thought it would be happening as of, Monday? Would be T35 date. So the T+2 before that would have been Thursday. And we've seen the price go meh. So today, Monday, should be the day that T35 starts to trigger things. But then, what's his name on Twitter? He does lots of the DD on metamaterial. Where is he? Where are you, friend? Where are you? You are Exact Perspective 508. He's doing lots of the DD on metamaterial. He does what's called the Voltron DD. Let me just punch his thing in here so that you guys can /exact _perspective 508. So in the chat there, exact _perspective 508 is his name. He does lots of the DD on metamaterials, and he's the one that discovered that after the merger, Torchlight, which should have been vaporized and turned into metamaterial, was still trading for like a month between these hedge funds and brokerages. So, so the whole system seems to be really screwed up as a result of that stuff. Yeah. So that's where we are. Okay, Manifest Destiny. Not meant to be FUD, just a wild thought. What if the CEOs and chairs of meme companies are also kicking the can, seeing how we are driving sales to their business to push quarterly earnings? Someone else had mentioned that, I think the last show had asked that, and, marketing's great. If you can keep your name in the news for as long as possible, no matter if it's good or bad, that usually gets that name stuck in the back of people's minds, and it's free advertising. GME is probably getting the greatest advertising push they've ever had in their entire lives, and they aren't spending a dime to do it. And now you've got AMC theaters that, you've got your Lowe's theaters, your Cineplex, Odeon, your whatever theaters out there. And when people are possibly seeing a movie, they might be like, AMC theaters, that's the one I recognize. And they go there and use that theater instead of the other one that's across the mall parking lot. So I think they can see real benefits to having their name in the news like this and in the minds of the public. Whether they're consciously kicking the can down the road, I don't think GME is. I think GME wants to do pain to the short hedge funds as much as possible. They seem very vengeance oriented. And I think that they want to hurt the short hedge funds and they want them to just feel their pain. So I don't think GME is kicking the can down. I think GME wants to stick a knife in and twist. AMC, on the other hand, I don't know, man. AMC's board just seems like a bunch of old fuddy-duddies, and I still don't think they quite get it. They issued 300 million shares during the baby squeeze. They dumped 11.5 million shares when it was popping in June. They just don't really seem to get what they should be doing, and that the short hedge fund is their enemy and not their buddy they went to grad school with. Okay, down here. Oh, that was a Stonk Mom question. I got the Stonk Mom question. Okay, is that it? Okay, that's it for the super chats. Let's head back to the main thing here. Daniel Motes, Houston, can or are hedge funds taking money out of their Cayman Islands stash to keep up with liquidity? Here's how I picture the Cayman Islands stash working, or the offshore money, is that you create a shell company that's owned by a shell company, it's owned by a shell company, it's owned by a shell company, all the way down. And eventually there's a bank account somewhere, whether it's in the Bahamas, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, Aruba, British Virgin Islands, wherever. And there's one aspect where you can say, hey, as this hedge fund in New York, I have all this capital in this bank account, we're good to go. And this bank account is offshore. And it's owned, by wholly owned subsidiaries for dozens of them until it comes back to the main hedge fund. Now, they can use that capital to keep up with their liquidity. But the minute the shit hits the fan, they can easily sever that tie, and whatever regulator needs to liquidate the hedge fund won't have access to the offshore cash. And someone somewhere will have control over that cash, and it won't be the regulator or the U.S. government. And I think that's the play of these offshore entities. I don't think they're taking money for the liquidity. I think they're using it to show they have the liquidity and then just not using it. And that's kind of how I feel that's working. Oh, we got a super chat here from 0x2764. Super chats, hey, would you recommend the bright yellow fat book behind your left shoulder as a bedtime story? Keep up the good work. Oh, which one is that? Oops, wrong way. That one there? What is that one? I think that's, I think it might be The Invisible Man. Is it? No, sorry, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Of course. Yeah, man. Jules Verne, baby. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Everybody should read this book. Yeah, so you're right. Let's do. Everyone should read that one. I read this when I was like in 4th grade. Still sits up here because I liked it so much. I do need to figure out how to. I want to make a good list of like Houston's recommended reads for everybody, and then have some sort of interactive thing where you can post your own recommended reads on there. I got to figure out how to do that. That's got to be a good way to do it. I tried Goodreads and I can't share a link to the Goodreads list. I put 50 books in there. There was like Houston's 55-star books, and I can't figure out how to get you guys to see that. Goodreads, figure your shit out. Yeah. So, yes, I would recommend reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. All right. Looking for the questions. What do we got here? I think. Oh, sorry, I just passed by the Cayman count again. Van CLVG. That Caltech Jet Lab is badass. Went there for my turbines class. Dude, Jet Propulsion Laboratory is one of the coolest places you'll ever get. And when COVID is over, go take a tour. They'll do tours, probably at least once a week. They'll have some, undergraduate or intern or somebody lead you on a tour. It's highly recommended. They are doing such weird, awesome things at Caltech and JPL. And they're not alone. There's other really cool national laboratories set up to do this stuff, but JPL is really badass. Are there any other accelerators? This is Chris Taylor. Any other accelerators being planned that are more energetic? Yeah, the CERN group apparently has one. Can't remember the name of it. Next generation Large Hadron Collider will cost 21 billion euros. 27. It's four times as long as the 27-kilometer Large Hadron Collider. So let's see here. Go to scene. I got to turn off Google Earth. Whatever. So this is from Nature. So they're going to be building a gigantic one. Is it going to be in the same area, like between Switzerland and France? Oh, go away. Quit popping up. There, yeah, it's going to be the same area. So I don't know if you can see this very well. That's the current Large Hadron Collider, and the new one is going to be 4 times the size. Just gigantic. Yeah. The speeds they'll be able to achieve with these particles, the energy levels, are going to be absolutely crazy. My head won't be able to wrap around the electron volts that will be generated by these things. I mean, particle accelerators, we've been using them for a long time. Your old televisions, cathode ray tube televisions, those are particle accelerators. They would accelerate particles into a screen, and then that would show an image. Those are kind of linear accelerators. Linear accelerators, they take two things from one end to the other, and they smash them into each other. These ones, they accelerate them around in a circle, and then they have the magnetic fields match them up, and then they smack into each other with incredible energies. Cool stuff. Very cool stuff. So I don't know what they're going to call this one. It's still going to be controlled by CERN. So this is the Large Hadron Collider, and this will be the Very Large Hadron Collider. I don't know. I don't know exactly what they'll call it. Okay. Oh, Miss Super Chat. Technician writes, really wish we knew when they had to cover. It is really starting to feel like they can short forever and keep offsetting costs with premiums from options trading. Why is SEC afraid of the hedge funds? This is how I think about the SEC, is that if the SEC goes in and, does what they should do, which is shut down these hedge funds from shorting and forcing them to cover, is that could directly trigger a market crash. And everyone's go, SEC, why'd you crash the economy? I think what the SEC is waiting for is for the economy to crash on its own so that they don't get the blame, and then they go in and arrest people and force changes in regulation. I have the feeling that that's pretty much what's going on with the SEC, is that they won't act until the economy finally trips and falls. So that's what they're waiting for. It would be interesting if they went after a smaller hedge fund or someone who's shorted and they just really threw the book at them. And they're like, hey, you and your billion-dollar firm, hit them with a book. And then they're just going to hold up their corpse to the rest of the hedge funds like, look what we're going to do to you. We might see a whole bunch of whistleblowers starting to come forward at that point, which maybe would give the SEC the ability to do one at a time. But my guess is that they're waiting for the market to absolutely fall off the cliff. Short hedge funds just vaporize, and they sweep in and collect everybody and make them, face the music after that. But until then, the short hedge funds will probably keep trying to short and short and short and short because they got those offshore bank accounts that they can dump money into. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, shoot. I just kicked my cord. Ah. There we go. So it's so nice and cool today. Monkey Butt has not tried to, like, leave her fuzzy blanket. Her sheepskin rug there. Boom, boom. Adam Levinsky, what is the highest negative beta stock besides GME? Honestly, I don't know. I mean, until this happened, oh, here we go. Here's a nice list of them. All right, market beat. Ugh. No, block. All right, so right now, oh, I can bring this up on the screen here. Got to go there. Here we go. So this is a list from Market Beat. So I'm not sure when this is. So this is negative beta according to the S&P, or in relation to S&P 500. So we got Codex Diagnostics, COS, L-Tech, BNTX, Zoom, a whole bunch on here. GME isn't listed as one of those negative betas at the moment. I have a feeling GME has a bigger negative beta than anything on here. But COS is on there. That's one of the meme stocks. Negative beta of 266. Let's see here. GME. It's from Zacks. What do they say? Oh. Wait, no. That's the price. Whoa. All right, so negative beta is at 216, but for some reason wasn't on the other list. So their negative beta is right up there. And for those who don't know, again, negative beta means the stock is doing the opposite of the market. So the market goes up, we go down at 2 times the difference. So yeah, I'm sure that there's probably lists we can do and find whatever like the current lists are. But as you can see, this one, the negative beta stocks here, GameStop is at negative 216, and they aren't even listed as top negative beta stocks on this list for Market Beat. The only meme stock I see on here is COS. I don't know if we see any other ones on here. Sorry, my tripod is in the way of the screen. I've got 2 screens. The tripod's like in the middle of them, so in the corner I can't quite see. Yeah, I don't see any other meme stocks on here. At least ones that I recognize as being listed as negative beta stocks. So, yeah, it'd be great if somebody would make a list. If anybody who knows how to program, want to make an excellent list of what the top negative beta stocks are, and we can keep track of those suckers. A negative beta is not a future predictor. It's just saying at that moment, whatever the market does, it's doing the opposite. Or whatever the market does, if they have positive beta, it's following the market, and so on. That's an excellent question. I don't know exactly what the highest ones are, but according to the other page, COS is one of them. Okay. Ba-ba-ba-ba. JR. Oh, we know they will blame MOAS in the end. Scapegoat can't be the banks, hedgies, media, government. Doesn't work for retail. Yeah, they're definitely going to blame us. We saw them doing that back in January and February and March. Like, oh, retail traders can't be trusted. They're too stupid to know what's going on. And this, we are at a weird point in history where retail investors know more about the market than they ever have at any point ever. So, yeah, that's we're in a really weird place, and so it's gonna be really, really hard to blame retail once it's all said and done. I wouldn't doubt if YouTubers and Redditors are asked to come before Congress during this postmortem and they interview us. They have us go under oath and raise our right hand and talk about what happened with the market. And and we'll be able to show them videos and DD explaining exactly how this was going to play out and how it did play out. And they won't be able to blame us in the end. They'll try, but those hedge funds will be vaporized, and they won't have the money and power they once did to keep that charade going. So I think they're going to try and blame us, and it might work somewhat in the media, but in the end, you retail investors know more about what's going on than probably anyone else on earth. Oh, I just dribbled water everywhere. Dribble cup. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. This is from Peak with a check mark. This is a really smooth brain question. But what would happen if we'd send ocean water from Earth to space or some other planet to offload the rising water, assuming we can stop climate change? That's an interesting question to think about. Well, the thing is that we need that water in the end, because that's where our rainfall comes from, is the excess water. Shall we go back to Google Earth? Let's go back to Google Earth. Da-da-da. Work. Okay, there's a Google Earth. So, the excess water that's in our ocean is from big ice sheets. And so these big ice sheets, these huge glaciers on the north and south poles, these are where that ice is being stored, and now the poles are warming and shedding that ice out into the oceans. It's not just the ice sheets and the poles, but we also have, glaciers in the Himalayas, glaciers in the Alps. We got glaciers in here. We got glaciers all over okay, now I'm getting too twisted. My brain can't handle. All right, there we go. Facing north again. We got, glaciers all up and down the mountain ranges of Western North America. We've got glaciers all over the place. And a lot of these glaciers are retreating and flooding, heading downhill back into the ocean. Normally there's the natural carbon cycle, which is volcanoes pump out CO2. That CO2 becomes particles in which water can condense around and rain in clouds, and then rain down the earth, and that washes into the ocean. That CO2 is then used to turn into crab shells and coral and sink to the bottom of the ocean, and then that goo at the bottom of the ocean subducts under the earth and superheats, turns into magma, farts out through a volcano again. The cycle just goes on and on and on and on. If you have, too much rainfall, too much CO2 gets pulled out of the atmosphere, the earth cools off, and you get a whole bunch of land ice. If you've got too much CO2, the earth warms up, more water evaporates, more rainfall happens, eventually the earth cools off. So you have this cycle that kind of ebbs and flows as a result. What's happening right now is that humans produce 6% more CO2 than the natural carbon cycle can sink. And part of that is because we cut down a whole bunch of trees. We seriously cut down a whole bunch of, look at these things. This is the Willamette Valley. The Willamette Valley was once all forests. We've got, all this area in Seattle were once forests. We can go we can go down to, Brazil. We got these huge giant rainforests here. But you can also see where huge deforestation has happened in these forests, and this was all jungle. All of this was jungle, and now it's like a steppe full of cattle. This was all jungle. Every last bit of this was jungle at one time, and it's all been stripped and mined and timbered, been felled. So the virgin rainforest is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So when you cut down a tree or when you burn it, you release all that trapped CO2 back in the atmosphere, and then you lose the thing that sucks CO2 out of the atmosphere. And so we are not only producing more CO2, but we're also destroying the things that naturally sunk this material. And we've got all this natural gas, petroleum, coal, stuff that for 1.5 billion years, this carbon had been put into the earth from things dying and getting covered with rocks. And now we're taking 1.5 billion years of carbon that's been sunk in the earth, and we're just exploding it back into our atmosphere again. There have been periods where CO2 is higher than it is now. When the dinosaurs were around, 60, 100 million years ago, we had some crazy oceans. Now, 60 million years ago, North America, Africa, South America, we're all closer to each other by, I don't know, probably a third, right? So maybe the shore of the United States would have been here and the shore of Africa would have been there. So the Atlantic Ocean was much smaller, but the ocean levels were up 300-400 feet because the CO2 levels were so high that basically it was lush and tropical almost everywhere. And so the middle of the United States was the Great Plains, was a giant inland sea at that time. So we got tons of fossils throughout here from 60 to 100 million years ago when the dinosaurs were around, that this was all ocean, where the breadbasket is of America. I could probably find... Years ago, National Geographic did a map, and the map box is in the other room. That'd be really annoying to try and find anyway, because I've got like 400 National Geographic maps. But oceans during dinosaurs. Find images. Let's close. Let's turn off Google Earth. Nope, that's giving us oceans, continents. I can do this. Here we go. Okay, so here's a picture of what Europe, Asia, and everything probably looked like during 6 million years ago. So you can see the giant inland sea in North America. Central America and South America have not connected yet. We've got a huge sea going through what is now the Mediterranean, Arabian Peninsula, Black Sea, Caspian Sea, and much of Western Russia are all ocean. India hasn't yet slammed into Asia. Antarctica and Australia are still, the last little remnants of connected Gondwana land. So we have a whole bunch of crazy things. Like the reason why we know that Gondwana land existed was that we can see dinosaur fossils in Africa, South America, Antarctica, and Australia that are all the same. So we knew that they were connected at one time, and that there was a species of dinosaur that roamed those plains before they all broke apart. So if we remove the water from our planet and put it into space or whatever, then we lessen our ability to probably have water evaporate. I don't know, it probably messes things up quite a bit. What we need is to have that water frozen on land for us in the end, ultimately. Did I miss super? I think I missed a super chat in there. Did I? I did. Did I see one come in and then miss it? I don't think I did. No. Cool. Oh, no. It's technician. Oh, no, that's technician one. Okay, so that's where we are. Okay. Cindy Ogden, thoughts on Pelosi giving a $25,000 a year salary increase to Congress today, but no stimulus for poor vets who can't find a job. It pays decent wages and benefits. I don't think Congress should be getting any wage increases at all. No. I mean, they already make $200,000 a year. They don't need any wage increases from anyone. I would like to see, maybe people who work for congressmen get a pay increase. Oh no, my internet is slowing down. I'm so sorry. I just got a big warning pop up that says my internet's slowing down. 1,000 apologies if I'm getting herky-jerky on the video. I don't know. But yeah, no matter which party's in charge, they always seem to pass little laws that help themselves first and think about everybody second until there's absolute disaster happening. Man, our world's so messed up. We've got basically like a group who wants to just do evil and see everyone die. We've got a group that may not want everyone to die, but they're still going to help themselves first before they do anything else for us. And it's the dichotomy of our two-party system, which, like we need a system that can share power among more ideologies, but we have what's called a first past the post system. It's a plurality system, meaning if more parties enter a race, a person who won't win a majority but still have a plurality can still be in charge. So if you've got, your Democrat, Republican, your Reform Party, your Greens, your Socialist, your far right, and they're all pulling votes from each other, then you might still have the Democrat get 35%, the Republican get 34%, the Democrat's going to go, even though they didn't get a majority. I think the only state that forces the runoffs is Georgia. I think everyone else still has a plurality there. But even then, Georgia is still heavily in a two-party system because the rest of the country doesn't do that, and that's where all the money for elections come from. I would love to see, I'd love to see the Senate disappear. Just get rid of the Senate entirely. They shouldn't exist. And then I would love to see the House. So right now we've got set 435 members of the House, which means the smallest states get one representative and the bigger states get more representatives, right? But it becomes very unequal. So we've got 500,000 folks or 430,000 folks in Wyoming who get a representative. And then in California, where there's 55 reps, 57, somewhere in there, they get one representative for like every 800,000 people. And so it gives much more power to like sagebrush in Wyoming than it does to actual human beings in California. I would love to see whatever the smallest state is gets one rep, and then every single state gets, for every 430,000 people, because that's the size of Wyoming, they get a rep for every 430,000 people. And then they aren't directly elected. You're voting for a party in that state. And if, you've got a state with 10 representatives and the Democrats get 40% of the vote, 4 of their 10 choices go to Congress. And if the Republicans get 4, then 4 of their 10 choices go to Congress. And if the Greens get 10%, then 1 of their selection goes to Congress. And then we start forcing coalitions to build. So you might have, majority parties that have a plurality. Let's say a party like the Republicans have, 150 out of the 435 seats, and they've got the most out of everyone, but it's not enough to have a majority. So they've got to start, making concessions to other parties to be able to get a majority. And we kind of set up a more parliamentary system. Things get done because you have to make promises to other groups to keep them in your coalition, and you got to pass laws. And right now we just have stalemates. People don't want to do anything and nothing gets done. So we've got, infrastructure that's just dying. We've got these graft projects and pork barrel projects that do things like make the James Webb Telescope go from $500 million over 5 years to $15 billion over 30 years. Because they want every little component built all over the country in their little districts, and it just takes forever. I will go off on politics all the time if you let me. But no, I don't think that anyone should have gotten a pay raise today in Congress. They need to be focusing on things like the debt ceiling. They need to be focusing on things like healthcare. They need to be focusing on things like infrastructure and stuff like that, and not on, giving themselves, an extra bonus. Okay. DD7 says, your webcam is focused to a distance behind you. Your books are in sharper focus than your face. I don't know. It's a cheap Chinese piece of crap. It focuses on whatever it wants to focus on, I guess. I don't know. I can't really do much about that until I get a better camera set up, I guess. Ian Rain, any possibility of opening up or finding wormhole via the collider? What is dark energy? Black holes, can these be created hypothetically by these colliders? That's an interesting question. So far when we do particle accelerators, we're smashing these things together at such high energies that they essentially just cause an explosion. So we get out of this explosion, a whole bunch of weird particles spin out briefly and blink into existence and often just blink out of existence. Now, could we create one with enough energy to create a mini black hole? I honestly don't know. To be able to do that, we'd essentially have to collide neutrons with neutrons. But because neutrons are neutral, there's no way to contain them inside of a magnetic field to accelerate them anyway. So I don't know if we could create them. I mean, maybe if we had a whole bunch of electrons and a whole bunch of protons smack into each other to make a whole bunch of neutrons that eventually smack into each other, we might be able to do it. But I don't think we could create like a mini black hole with a big particle accelerator. I may have to actually confer with my sister. She's the nuclear physicist, and see what she thinks about that. But I don't think we could actually accelerate neutrons to smack into each other and make mini black holes, because they're neutral. They just don't have a charge, and they don't produce a magnetic field. So I don't really know. They are superconductors. They can be superconductors though. So inside of a neutron star, these things are spinning crazy fast. Some of them are spinning like thousands of times a second. And that's because you take a giant star, right, that might be, rotating at once every 30 days. And as you make it smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, it starts to speed up more and more and more. Just like that ballerina or ice dancer pulls their arms in, they start to spin really fast. They're taking the angular momentum and they're making it much smaller zone, so it allows for faster speed. I mean, if you're in an office chair right now listening to me, you can spin your office chair with your arms out, and if you pull your arms in, you can start to spin faster. So if you take this giant star and you compress it into something the size of a city, it's spinning crazy fast. Black holes spin even faster. But the way we theorize that a neutron star is formed is that it's this really compact, super dense. I'm talking like a spoonful would weigh 300 million tons. That's how dense this thing is. And but there is like this weird liquid neutron slurry inside of there. And inside that slurry, if there happens to be a free electron, it moves really easily through it like a crazy superconductor. So you can get wild magnetic fields coming out of these neutron stars. And when we can see those magnetic fields, we call them pulsars, because let's say the neutron star is spinning really fast and the magnetic field's off kilter a little bit, so it's the pulse hitting our telescope 3 times a second or whatever as it flies by. And it looks like the star is turning on and off. Blink, 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 blink. So you can get magnetic fields inside of this neutron slurry, but the neutrons themselves are not the things producing that. It happens to be free particles that didn't quite get combined into the all neutron mix that's in there. So I don't know if we dang it, I keep kicking that thing. Stupid cable. I don't think we can, let me adjust this stupid thing. There we go. I don't think we can quite create those black holes. Now, finding a wormhole, wormholes are purely hypothetical, and we can, play with math all day long to see what would happen if they did exist. But until we actually see one, I don't know if we can prove it exists or if we can open one up. They'd be fantastic if they did, because that would make all that science fiction much radder. Okay, but dark energy. Dark energy is something different, and this is what I worked on when I did my senior thesis in my undergraduate, which is I postulated that dark energy is the result of matter, antimatter, appearance, and collision throughout the universe. So everywhere, all the time, for some reason, and we don't know the mechanics behind it, a piece of antimatter and a piece of matter appear into existence. They just blink into existence, they collide, they vanish, and leave behind a gamma ray photon. Now, if you've got big separations between galaxy clusters, there's higher odds that these particles are going to blink in existence in that void between the two galaxy clusters. And the bigger the distance you have between these things, the weaker gravity is between them. So gravity weakens with a 1/r² law. And that means like this glass of water, if it's a meter from me, might have 1 gravity. And if it's 2 meters from me, it's 1 over 2 squared. So it's 1/4 the amount of gravity. If it's 3 meters away, it is 1/9 the strength. So that the power of gravity falls off very quickly with very large distances between objects. Now, gravity can be really powerful if you have huge masses still, because it can still make up for that distance. But when you get far enough away, gravity starts to weaken. But as you get far enough away, more and more of these particles are blinking into existence, shooting a gamma ray one direction or another. And so eventually, those gamma rays, they could be coming from over here, firing that way. They're coming from over here, firing that way. So eventually, there's just outward pressure. It's like a balloon inflating. You blow into a balloon. It doesn't matter how the particles are vibrating inside that balloon. The pressure is always going to be outwards, right? So you get so much of these gamma ray photons pushing outwards that essentially it acts like a gigantic solar wind in the void of space. And so the outward pressure starts to overtake the inward pressure of gravity trying to pull these objects in. And that's why we have these objects now accelerating away from each other at faster and faster velocities. So that was my thesis for my my undergraduate senior thesis. So far, no one's been able to prove me wrong. A couple other people have worked on papers with the same hypothesis. The math checks out. We just haven't proven it one way or the other yet. So dark energy just happens to be this weird force that's pushing these objects out from each other, and we don't know why they're doing that. We've got my hypothesis, but who knows if we'll ever be able to prove it, at least in my lifetime. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I missed super chat from Christopher Sawchuck. Incapta, INCT, has a beta of -40. Macroaccess.com says so anyways. I like to pick our investing's brain about beta. Yeah, so you might get negative beta on crazy stocks that pop huge on an off day for the market, or one that sinks incredibly when the market does really well. So, that negative beta is kind of instantaneous according to what the market's doing today. So you might have, a company that is an OTC company that announces a huge dividend, but the rest of the market is just taking a dump that day, and so that OTC stock flies through the roof. It might go from 4 cents to $1 in a day, and it went up 25 times. And so its negative beta might be 25 as a result of that day. So it's not like a long-term predictor. It's just showing what that stock has done. What you can do is you can look at the negative beta over a period of time, which is what you can do with these meme stocks like COS and GME and AMC and whatnot, is that they maintain a negative beta for months, meaning whatever the market does, they do the opposite day in, day out for months. So it's important to look at the long term on that negative beta as indicators than to look at, say, one particular day. A stock may have gone bonkers one way or the other. So let's say a company declares bankruptcy and their stock just drops off a cliff while the Dow goes up that day. They may also have a huge negative beta as a result. So that negative beta doesn't necessarily mean it's doing well. It might mean that day there just was not their day. But Incapta, I don't know who the heck Incapta is or what they do. There's a lot of companies out there, I don't know what they do. Okay. Hey Houston, do you think there may be a forming hotspot below the Hudson Bay? The geophysical data of the mantle there is wild. Well, let's look at ye old Hudson Bay here. Hudson Bay is a big shelf. Okay, I gotta click on you. Nope, not you. There we go. Let's turn off the Chrome there. So Hudson Bay is this huge bay up here. Now, there are some islands in Hudson Bay, but it's a really shallow bay. It wouldn't take much of land ice to form, big glaciers to form, to make Hudson Bay basically dry. It's a very, very shallow bay. I don't see any volcanic activity in this. This is all ancient continental shelf in here. and most of it was carved out by ancient glaciers in the first place. So you can see all these little fjords there. These are all evidence of ancient glaciers being in the area. So I don't know if there's any hot spots forming under there. You can see the difference between the water here, the seafloor here, and the seafloor out in the deep ocean, where you got the spreading ridges and you got oceanic islands and stuff like that. These are what hotspot volcanoes will look like. They'll make little seamounds like this. We can see them. We can see them all over the place. We got little seamounds happening off the western United States. We've got tons of them from Hawaii and other island chains throughout the Pacific. These are what the hotspots look like, and they make these little seamounds. There could be one under Hudson Bay that someone's measuring, but it hasn't made a little pimple yet. Hasn't shown itself. But this is all a very volcanically inactive area. This part of the North American continent is super old. The Abitibi Green Belt, which runs through much of like Ontario, the rock's like 3 billion years old. It had volcanics 3 billion years ago, but really hasn't had much since then. So it's really flat. You can watch your dog run away for days. It's just basically these lakes full of black flies and mosquitoes, and it's pretty miserable. 9 months of winter, 3 months of bugs. There's like a 2-week window at the end of August where you won't get like bitten or stung by everything. But yeah, it's all really ancient. And most of that's because it's been just carved down by glaciers. Glacier after glacier after glacier just carved down the mountains there and just worn them away. There was at one time, 3 billion years ago, probably 30,000 foot mountains in this rock. And today, those mountaintops have been just carved down to nothing. So I don't think there's any hot spots forming under Hudson Bay. There are volcanoes in Antarctica. There are volcanic ranges down here. There's volcanic mountains in Antarctica. This is probably a chain as a result of a plate diving underneath Antarctica. So that's just like you'd see in the Andes or the Cascade Mountains. So they do exist in Antarctica. I don't see anything in the Hudson Bay that suggests that. But excellent question though. Okay. What time we got? 2:39. I can go to about 3 o'clock today, since I started a half an hour late anyway. If I get another 20 minutes or so. This is from Really Hamilton. Do you think areas seeding clouds and getting water that should go elsewhere is disrupting climate around the world? I don't know. The only place that I know it's actively doing it is the UAE. So we're in a desert here. In the summertime, it gets really hot and it gets very humid, and direct sunlight causes a lot of the water in the Gulf to evaporate in the atmosphere, and it can make really high clouds throughout the day. And they started sending up these little drones up into the atmosphere, and they send these huge electrical charges across each other up in the upper atmosphere, which triggers a rapid condensation of the clouds, and it will rain for a brief moment and cool everything off. Those cloud systems, I don't know enough about the climate of the region to figure out if those cloud systems would, blow and go over, what was it, the Zagros Mountains here, and end up making more rainfall over the Zagros Mountains from orographic lift or whatever, or if I don't know enough about the. Let's look at the. What's the name of that wind patterns? Let's see here. Is this what I want? There's a really cool. There it is. Okay, sorry. Turn on Chrome. Turn off Google Earth. So this is earth.nullschool.net showing current wind patterns happening. So you can see a hurricane or tropical cyclone forming off of the Earth here, off of in the Eastern Pacific off Mexico. Probably see some storm systems. Actually, not too much going on in the Pacific. There's one cyclone happening off of Bermuda, and we get to the Persian Gulf. Let's see what the winds are doing. So it's pretty stagnant. So you can see where the direct sunlight is hitting. You don't have too many wind patterns happening. We do have monsoon, so a lot of winds coming directly into the Indian subcontinent, probably bringing storm systems with them. We can see, if we go to Hawaii here, we can see the trade winds are not quite hitting Hawaii at the moment. So we're getting a lot of high pressure forming up here, pushing winds to the south, but not too much trade wind action in Hawaii. But you can kind of see like the wind cycle happening. Southern Pacific here. Yeah, you can see the cycles. The wind often comes up the coast and down the coast if you're north or south of the equator, and if you're at the equator, we got more direct sunlight happening on the northern Pacific side of the equator right now than the southern side. So the jet streams all get kind of pushed a little further north on the southern hemisphere, and further north in the northern hemisphere as a result as well. But I don't know if cloud seeding, the only place I know it's happening is in the UAE, if that affects any other regions from getting rainfall. I honestly don't know. Possibly, very possibly that it could, because it takes that moisture out of the air that would be meant to go elsewhere. Interesting question. I'll have to look if there's any research about that. We did cloud seeding back in the day. We would put, I think, silver nitrate in the atmosphere, which would cause the clouds to basically dump their loads. But the United States government stopped doing it after running those experiments, and that was because the government didn't want to be financially responsible for flash floods destroying people's property. Because if you in the United States, the way our legal system works is that if you cause something to happen and it adversely affects somebody, you are going to be financially liable. And if I want to make sure these farmers have rain for their fields, causes a flash flood at Jim Bob's house down the road, Jim Bob's going to sue the government for a bunch of money and make that whole system collapse anyway. Yeah, it's why you get to Hawaii. Oops, that's not Google Earth. Let's go to Google Earth. If you, still not over Hawaii. Okay. Get over Hawaii. We've got these volcanoes here, right? And so in 1984, there was a lava flow that came off of this rift zone of Mauna Loa. It was flowing down, getting really close to Hilo, which is the most populous town on the Big Island. And there's talk of hey, let's divert that lava flow. Let's build earthen dams or spray it with water and make the lava flow go elsewhere. Okay, so you make the lava flow go elsewhere and you save this town, but it goes and it smashes Callao or Mountain View and one of these other towns. Then all the people here can sue the government for destroying their homes because nature was going to take it into Hilo. Hey, you destroyed my house to save these places, pay me. Which led to other problems. So this volcanic lava was coming down in 1984, and all of a sudden the insurance company said, if the lava hits your house, we're not going to pay out. It's a natural disaster. You built your home in a place that can be hit by volcanoes. We're not going to pay any money for it. And so what the entire town of Hilo started doing in 84 was they started surrounding their homes with gas cans, so that if the lava hit the gas can explode, and that fire is what would burn the house down. And they had fire insurance. And so they're like, hey, if you're not going to pay me for the natural disaster, you're going to pay me for my house burning down from a fire. And the insurance companies went, oh my God, we could have a firestorm on our hands where 12 homes might get destroyed by this lava flow, but we have to pay for 20,000 homes to get destroyed by a firestorm. So they quickly announced if your home is destroyed by lava, we will pay for it. Please stop putting gas cans surrounding your homes. And the citizens of Hilo rejoiced. So they took all their gas cans back. But the lava flow never quite made it. It made it to just outside of town, but didn't make it into town itself. But there are places where the lava flows have hit. Kilauea is here. It's Kilauea volcano. You can see all sorts of lava flows from Kilauea. And the rift zone for Kilauea runs all the way down here. And Leilani Estates was a place built up in the 50s and 60s. There's a whole bunch of jungle. They sold all this property to people on the East Coast and newspapers. Back of the newspaper, like, buy a piece of Hawaii for $1,000. People bought it, and it's in the rift zone, which means the earth can literally split open and lava can shoot out in these huge curtains. And so they filled in the rift, like the actual crack in the earth with gravel, and then built homes on top of it. And in 2014, 2015, the last couple of years, been a whole bunch of lava flows have just destroyed homes all in this area. You can't get a mortgage. You can't get insurance. The homes are really cheap because the earth could split open at any time. You can see right here, when we zoom in, there were homes right here, and they're gone now. The earth literally split open and formed these huge magma flows that flowed outwards. And you might get little call them pukas, these little holes here, little islands of homes that made it. There's really cool stuff that happens with these little treed islands that form, that the lava flow goes around. Is there's fruit flies all over Hawaii, and the fruit flies, they'll get trapped because it's too far of a distance to fly for a tiny little fly that only lives for 24 hours to get from this set of trees to this set of trees over here. So what ends up happening is these little tree systems start to create their own species of fruit fly, and they start making wingless fruit flies because there's no natural predators. They don't need to fly anymore, so they just crawl around on the ground. So every single solitary one of these little islands between the lava flows will form their own species of fruit fly, and they'll all lose the ability to fly because they have no reason to. They can't go anywhere anyway, so they just live on the ground from that point forward. So there's a whole bunch of biologists that study the evolution of fruit flies in Hawaii, because you'll get hundreds of species as a result of these lava flows. This is the geothermal plant, I believe, that just happened to get spared by the lava flow. So they dig deep wells, and they get water to boil as a result of the magma chambers down there, and they generate energy. How the hell did I get from talking about seeding clouds into rain to talking about Drosophila? Man, that was a long tangent. You're welcome for that one, everybody. There's some cool evolutionary biologists working in the Big Island studying these flies. Okay. Back to the Big Houston. Hi. All right, definitely missed a super chat or something in there. I know I did, didn't I? There's one. Yesterday's. In your opinion, how many shares of GME would one need to never work again? Thanks, dude. If you do it right, 1. I honestly do. I think if you have 1 share and you manage to sell on that absolute peak, you're set for life. But only one person is going to sell on the peak. But if that triangle of the peak is a steep enough price range, there might be a few thousand people that can sell 1 share and never have to work again. I'm not taking my chances. That's why I've got more than 1 share. But I do think, honestly, that there's somebody out there who's going to sell 1 share for just an absolutely ridiculous amount of money, and they'll never have to worry about anything ever again. Yesterday's 75. Yeah. So, people got their lotto tickets, and there we go. Forest fires in Russia, asks Eric Antil. Thoughts. Oh man, back to the Google Earth. You guys just make me go to Google Earth all the time. All right. So we got Google Earth here. Zooming out. Got to go to Russia. Okay, so Siberia. Siberia is basically everything west of the Ural Mountains. So Ural Mountains kind of split Russia in half. So this is all Siberia out here. This is like the biggest wilderness on the entire planet, except for maybe northern Canada. Winters are absolutely inhospitable. Talking like negative 100 degrees. Just absolutely horrendous. And the land there has what's called permafrost. So the winter is so cold and so sunless that the land itself will freeze. It'll freeze deep, 10, 20 meters into the earth. And that stuff is permafrost. And even when the summer comes, the land a few meters down is frozen solid and will remain that way for a long time. And places like Alaska, you got the trans-Alaskan pipeline taking oil from up in the north slope and bringing it down to ports in Anchorage, and these pipes run all the way across, and they're anchored in the permafrost. So that land was supposed to never change. Well, that permafrost is melting, and the pipes are sinking and cracking and breaking, and so we're finding lots of oil spills that go across Alaska as a result of the permafrost melting now, because it's getting so warm that layer that will melt is extending from maybe a couple meters down to several meters. And so they have anchored these pylons deep into the permafrost, but now that part of the permafrost is being affected by the warm weather. Okay, so in Siberia, that same permafrost melting is happening, and as a result of that melting, it's releasing a whole bunch of water and a whole bunch of methane, and that stuff is escaping from the bogs, the permafrost bogs that are out here, and drying that stuff out. And so if the plants there don't have access to the frozen water in the soil, because the frozen water in the soil is leaving, then they're going to dry out a whole bunch. And as they dry out, you get huge fires. They had fires that are thousands and thousands of square miles over the past few years. And that burning is just releasing an incredible amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. And some of that burning is being exacerbated by the fact that there's huge pockets of methane, because these ancient bogs, they had decomposition happening in them and they froze over. So now all this methane is being released all of a sudden. And so the fires can get exacerbated, and we've got huge methane explosions. Let's see if I can find one. I have to leave the pretty wind thing and go methane explosions Siberia bogs. Oops, I forgot to turn the Google Earth off. Turn off Google Earth. So this is National Geographic. So we get huge craters like this in Siberia, and what these ancient bogs were, where pockets of methane just explode, possibly as a result of embers from fires, possibly as a result of, if the ground unfreezes and you get more decay happening, it can heat up and heat up and heat up and heat up and actually combust on its own. So you get these wild craters, and they're happening all over Siberia as a result of the ground melting and releasing methane into the atmosphere. Blah, 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 blah. There's one that's burning that's like Satan's gateway, Satan's hell, Satan's door, Siberia methane crater. This one in Turkmenistan, door to hell. That's what it was. So this is something similar. It was a methane explosion, and it's been burning for 40 years. This is in Turkmenistan, and so they have. Again, I'm always Smithsonian Magazine ad. They're pretty crazy. Satan's door video. Why would the video be unavailable? So Satan's door. Let's see here. It's pretty wild pictures. It's just been burning and burning and burning and burning for 40 years as a result. We actually have a whole bunch of these forming all over Siberia as right now, as these pockets of methane. This one has a constant source of methane, so it's a little different because it's coming from deep within the earth. But in Siberia, you get these pockets exploding, and then they make these craters out in the tundra. It's pretty wild. Okay. I've totally missed some super chats. As yesterday's sheep, duck, and cow, no question. Just thank you for fighting the good fight. Stay classy and true. Oh, thank you, sheep, duck, and cow. PJ Anderson, do you believe in UFOs? What's your thoughts on the recent release of UFO info from the Gov? We talked about this a bit on the show. I've seen UFOs. I've seen objects I cannot identify. One was definitely a human being, and another was I couldn't tell because it was so far away. Have I talked about my UFO experiences in here? I know I talk about it when I do my astronomy class, because we always do a whole section on life in space. But let's Google Earth come back. Oops. Come on, switch to the other screen here. There we go. Okay, so my first one was when I was a kid, and I grew up on Bainbridge, where I am, and I grew up in this area on the north end of the island, on this little street here called Sparger Loop, which went along the water. We weren't on the water side; we were on the treed side here, and so my house is actually right there. My best friend lived in the woods over here, and one summer evening, I was maybe 9 years old. I was walking back home, following the road back, and as I was walking, going kind of northeast, off in the distance, really high in the sky, probably somewhere out here, maybe further away, was a bright light that like shot across the sky. I was like, oh, a meteor, cool. And then all of a sudden it shot back the other way. I was like, wait a minute. And then did this crazy zigzag motion in the sky and then fired off. And I was like, that was impossible. And I ran home, told my mom about it. And then she told me about when she saw a crazy flying saucer when she lived in the Virgin Islands that did similar stuff, or UFO or whatever. That was my first one. My second one was in, I don't know, 2002, 2003, out here in Utah. Where's my canyon? Southern Utah. I need to go Gooseneck State Park, Utah. There it is. Okay. So there is this little parking lot, which actually years before my sister and I had gone here, and when she was reporting for the Navy, I was maybe 17. We did a road trip across the country, just kind of hitting spots, and it was like 2 a.m, looking for a spot to camp, and there's just a sign off the highway that said, camp here. So we drove down this road, and there's some tents, and we set up our tent and fell asleep. And in the morning, unzipped the tent, only find like 1,000-foot cliff about 2 feet from me. We didn't know. Like, it's just flat out there. And so you can't tell if there's a giant canyon because the horizon just goes on and on and on. And we almost just like drove off the cliff when we were looking for a spot to camp. But anyway, a couple years later, 5 years later, I was at the same camp spot again, and was literally eating breakfast, just sitting on the canyon wall, eating breakfast, and at maybe 6 or 7 in the morning, and along came this jet going very, very slowly. I'm talking, it was a jet of some kind, but it didn't make any sound. It looked like it was going about 30 miles an hour, and it was all black, and it flies right by me, and I'm sitting there eating my breakfast, and the dude who's in the pilot seat, he locked eyes with me, and he waved, and I almost just dropped my breakfast. And then he just flew on, following the canyon walls, beneath the canyon walls, and just took off. And I ran to the other side of the park here, ran to the other side, and he flew by again. And he waved, and I was just like, and he then kept flying off. The plane didn't make a sound. It was not super huge, probably not as big as a fighter jet, maybe a little bit smaller. Not a sound, all black, definitely a dude in it. And to this day, I've never seen a jet even look even something similar. There's no jet or plane that could follow this wiggity-waggity canyon at all. I don't know what I saw. So I have seen unidentified flying objects. So that was like 2003, I think, when I was there and I saw that thing. Whether those crazy objects we see are aliens or not, I cannot say one way or the other. But I do know UFOs exist because I have seen them. And I'm sure lots of you have UFO stories as well. The crazy thing is that the video released by the government, or I should say it was released, it was leaked by somebody in the government to UFO hunters who released the information. And then the U.S. government said, yep, we have no idea what that is. It did happen, which is something that really hasn't happened before. Except for in 1947, when the Roswell crash happened, there was an announcement by the U.S. government, hey, this crash happened. It's alien. We don't know what it is, but we've got it. And then all of a sudden, Truman and the rest of the U.S. government were like, no, retract. And so they retracted. Well, just joking. We didn't get a UFO. Haha, really funny joke. So that was the closest the U.S. government had ever come to saying, yes, unidentified object has happened. There's some documentaries going on right now. There's one on Netflix just came out with lots of interviews. Although they don't do a really good job differentiating between like total crackpot charlatans and people who may actually be much more reliable witnesses. So that's something that we have to take into consideration. And then there's another one that J.J. Abrams produced. I think it's on like Showtime or something. I've not seen it yet. If I get access to it, I'll watch it. It always fascinates me. But those are my thoughts on UFOs. So they could be humans doing weird things. They could be actual aliens. I can't say one way or the other. But it's pretty wild the things people have seen out there and recorded. Or I can't explain them. I don't know. Someone who has more access to higher technology than I do is definitely doing it. All right, let's see here. It's 3:00. I can do. Was that the last super chat? I think that was. We'll do one more kick-ass question, and then we'll have to see. I probably will be doing a show this week. I was supposed to take a group of UW people out to look for minerals in Eastern Washington, but the smoke is so bad, and they're supposed to get a lightning storm tomorrow, which will just make for more fires. And I don't want to be in that, man. I hate the smoke so much. It just sounds miserable and just shortening my lifespan. So I'll probably be staying here and not going on that trip. And so I'll be doing a show on Wednesday. Maybe one tomorrow if I can find the time. I do have a lot of things I gotta get done. So doing that trip anyway would just be a pain in my butt. So yeah, all right. Let's look for one more question here and see what we got. Stanton Sikorsky asks, you think the government isn't raising the debt ceiling because they are going to let the MOAS happen and collect the capital gains taxes, and that is what will pay for it? I don't know if they're thinking that far ahead. I would bet that people in Congress have probably bought various puts and calls and are ready to short the market over the next few weeks. I have no doubt if members of Congress have done that. We saw that Nancy Pelosi's husband took some big stakes in AMC and GME, or at least in a fund that is long on those. But the last time we got to a precipice with a deficit was when 2011. And we let it get pretty close to the brink, and the United States government's credit scores actually dropped. We went from AAA plus, and we dropped down for the first time and only time in American history, and that caused the market to drop like 20%. And if you have a bunch of puts on, S&P 500 indexes or on the Dow, you're going to make a killing if you let it get to the brink, and They may be doing that. They may be manipulating the market this way so they can make a killing as well. So if you trade like an elected official, you are going to make a fortune. That's why we need to make trading illegal in the United States for elected officials. They should not be allowed to have anything to do with the market because they can manipulate the market, and it's insider trading is what they do. And they can tell their family, hey, you might want to buy this stock because we're about to award a huge contract to these guys, and you're going to make a fortune. Or what they did last year when the senators got the report on COVID and how it's going to become a pandemic and it's going to cost lives and it's going to tank the economy. These folks went out and they sold their shares in other stocks and they bought biotech. They invested in Zoom. They invested in companies that would work on vaccines or possibly had medicine that would work with antiretrovirals. So they do insider trading all the time, and it's disgusting, and they shouldn't be allowed to. Okay, one last super chat here. Cosmic deception, extrasensory perception is used to connect to the UFOs, which are literal living craft, according to a former Lockheed employee. I do recommend, if you want to read something, 1 sec, I'm going to leave the screen for like 10 seconds. This is an older book. It's probably 20 years old now. I'm sure there might be an updated version. Skunk Works. It's a fascinating read about the ultra secret experimental aircraft division that does like military contracts and stuff at Lockheed Martin. Fantastic read. When did this come out? Probably in the 90s, be my guess. I think I read it in high school. 1994 was when it was written. So it's very old, but it talks about the development of the U-2, the F-117, the SR-71, and other weird experimental craft. There's probably a lot of stuff they couldn't talk about in here. It does include pictures. So, they got a whole section of really cool pictures of crazy spacecraft. But I do recommend it's a good read. Will blow your mind. And that connects to Lockheed Martin. And I'm sure the government came in and said, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, you can't talk about this. So there's probably things that aren't included in there about, maybe UFOs. I don't know. But hey, buddy. Hey. Leave your hoo-ha alone. There we go. So I recommend it. You guys are super chatting me and I'm getting stuck in here. Sonny Liston, how do I trade like an elected official? Lol. They do have to report what they're trading. That's the one thing they have to do is they have to file reports of what their holdings are. So if you just follow their holdings, you're probably gonna do all right. That'd be the thing to do with your MOAS money. Is when you get your MOAS money, just invest in nothing but what elected officials invest in, and that'll probably keep you going for a long time. Yeah. All right, everyone. I got to get ready. I have to head out here in a little bit. Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for the awesome questions today. We had some fun ones. I might be able to see you for a little bit tomorrow. I'll definitely see you on Wednesday, hopefully at 12:30. Get my life together, and I'll get on at 12:30 on Wednesday. Stay safe, stay happy, and enjoy yourselves. All right, everyone.